and organize it. So I really want to give kudos to the volunteers who have donated so much time over the years to making the projects work. So as Rob mentioned, one of the tenets of Clean North is to think globally, act locally. And over the years, we have run projects focused on recycling, collecting, and getting recyclable materials to a place where they can be used. Living in an isolated Northern Ontario community, sometimes that's really challenging. And sometimes we go through dry spells. But over the years, we've done recycling of electronic waste. At the time that was really booming, over 100 truckloads, semi-trucks of electronic waste were collected and processed by recyclers, primarily in Southern Ontario. We've also recycled trees, organic material like pumpkins, styrofoam, cardboard, books, bedding for the Humane Society, anything that we can collect and with a minimum of out-of-pocket cost or with the right partner, getting that recyclable material into a recycling process. The Christmas Tree Depot is one of our flagship projects. Every year for a couple of weeks, we are set up at Cambrian Mall collecting Christmas trees. Get a couple of volunteer organizations come out and chip the trees up. And then in the spring, we have a mulch giveaway event. Really wonderful acidic mulch that is great for gardens. We've done tree planting, hundreds of trees planted around the city in different locations. We have been advocates for recycling, improving the recycling in Sault Ste. Marie, as challenging as that is, and as limited as our recycling is right now. We are constantly applying pressure to our municipal leaders and our provincial leaders to try to broaden, try to connect with markets so that we can recycle more material and keep it out of the landfill. We're also very involved in public education. So educating the public about what can and what should not go into our blue boxes. Educating people about all kinds of ways to reduce their footprint, to improve the environmental conditions in Sault Ste. Marie and globally through less use of single-use plastics. Thinking ahead when you go out on an adventure, take a bottle of water with you so you don't have to buy a plastic bottle of water. We've got many messages and information that we've made readily accessible and available to our citizens, our neighbors, about how to recycle better, about how to live greener. We've got several people who are really engaged in pollution monitoring and reporting, trying to hold our industrial entities here in the Soo accountable, trying to hold our provincial government accountable for actually enforcing the rules that they've made. It's challenging, it's daunting. We don't have a lot of huge wins there, but we're a voice to try to keep some accountability and some awareness up about significant environmental contaminants that we're living with here in Sault Ste. Marie. We run an awards and a scholarship program, have for a number of years with a couple of partners. We've been sourcing and building green products, rain barrels, composters, bat houses for a number of years and making those available at basically at cost. I don't know how many hundred rain barrels there are. We sell something on the order of 20 to 30 a year, and we've been doing that for many years. So there's several hundred Clean North rain barrels out there collecting rainwater and putting it to good use in their gardens. And then we're really engaged in a number of ways with youth in the community, trying to educate, inform, get the youth in our community enthusiastic, and get them thinking about choices that they make and products that they might use or different sources of material that they might access, and giving them opportunities to get involved with this as environmental volunteers. We've had many high school students who've gotten some of their mandatory volunteer hours. Our Christmas Tree Depot is a really popular place for that to happen. I know both of my kids got a lot of their volunteer hours by coming out and volunteering at the Christmas Tree Depot. Or we get youth to come out and help with our community garden program, which I'll talk about in a bit. So we're very engaged, trying to reach the youth in our community, get them trained early, get them familiar with the language and the thought processes, and making informed choices. Because that's what it comes down to, is each of us making informed decisions that each make a marginal difference, and collectively we believe that we're having a positive influence on Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma. Some keys to our longevity and our successful track record. So we start with creative, energetic people who have a good idea. That could be one of our leaders in our organization, or somebody brings us an idea or an opportunity. And we talk it through with them. And if they haven't got a clear project plan with clear outcomes, we try to help them get to there. And so we'll talk a project through at its early stages, try to define it and get it to where we know there's going to be a clear outcome that we'll all recognize when we get there. Then we check it. Is this within Clean North's mandate? We have a number of projects that come across our email, or we're made aware of, that we would like to get involved in, but they're either a little outside our mandate or they're beyond our means to resource them properly. We're a fairly small, frugal organization. And so there are some projects that we're not able to take on because we don't have the resources. So we try to be careful about that, be mindful, and not just say yes to everything because we think it's a good idea. And in that way, we try to stay effective, and we try to have a high rate of achieving our goals for projects that we tackle. Our organization, we try to implement sound business practices. So we stay sustainable. We operate transparently. Our meetings, including our budget discussions, are open to the public. We are Canada Revenue compliant. One of our board officers, our financial guy, is a professional accountant. And so we have very strict rules. Although we're a simple organization, we adhere to the CRA guidelines for not-for-profits, and that keeps us out of trouble. We try to be ethical. We talk about projects before we initiate, before we commit. Everything that we do that involves Clean North resources is board approved. So it comes before our board, and our members who are participating in the meeting get to decide, is this a project that we want to take on? Are we prepared to put some resources towards it? We really thrive on good communications. We try to talk about projects, no surprises. We're happy to answer questions about it. And we're very communicative, and I'll talk about our social media presence, that we're quite open and transparent about the things we're doing in the community and how we're going about doing them, and ways for people to get involved. And we try to keep good records. So our monthly meetings have minutes, and they get recorded. We have a record going back at least 12 or 15 years of agendas and meeting minutes. And so we so far, knock on wood, we have not been audited for our activities, but we're prepared to if our number comes up. And finally, key to success is we have a fairly simple organizational structure that's easy to maintain, pretty easy to understand, and it doesn't get in our way of doing projects, which is kind of an important attribute of a volunteer-run organization. We try to keep things simple. We try to keep the drama out of it. And we, as a central part of our organization, we try to make it easy for people to come in and do projects on behalf of Clean North or with Clean North. I'm going to talk about the organizational structure here a little bit. So we have the central administrative core with elected officers, monthly meetings, an annual general meeting, financial transactions. Our project and funding approvals are discussed and approved by vote and recorded in our minutes. We have project report backs at subsequent meetings. We keep records. We have limited infrastructure, so we don't have to maintain a whole lot of stuff. And we really try to keep it simple. If things start getting complicated, it gets harder to maintain. So we really try to keep our organization and our non-project commitments at a minimum so that we can focus on projects, which is where we want to be spending our time. And then around that central core of facilitation and organization, we have our Clean North projects and project areas. And I'll go into a little more detail about that. So one of the keys for our structure is each project area that we take on has a leader. If somebody comes to us with an idea and we want to get into a, we're pitched to, hey, well, you guys want to get involved in this? Inevitably, the first or second question that comes up at our meetings is, okay, this sounds good. Who's going to lead it? If we don't have a volunteer that steps up among our group or the person bringing the project to us who says, yes, I will be the lead, we will shelve that project. We do not take on a project if we don't have a leader for it. And that person has to be committed to seeing the project through and really doing a lot of the legwork on their own on the project. We rarely strike subcommittees for anything. We do have a few subcommittees that do a few tasks, but for the most part, we have individual leaders, and you'll see their first names up here. And I'm going to profile each of these people on our little pie organization chart here and show you some of the things that they do and the impacts that they're making. The other thing is it's not really by design, but it's kind of the way the organization is flowing right now, is there isn't a huge amount of overlap between the project areas. They're complementary, but we don't have people stepping on each other's toes or struggling for, well, are you running this project or am I? So really, when somebody gets to go ahead and wants to lead a project, my job as board chair and our board and our meetings, we really try to get an approval, get it resourced, and then get out of the way and let the project run and let the person who has the passion and the knowledge and the time and the commitment to that project, let them get on with it. We'll help recruit volunteers to come out and work on the project. But none of us has time to be, looking over each other's shoulders and mucking around in another project. We've each got stuff that we're trying to get done. So it really is a smooth running organization, and we're kind of all on the same page on this, and we listen and are aware of each other's projects. But it really gives us the freedom to do things that we all care about. And so it's kind of fun. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the really key people who are core parts of Clean North. So I had to start with Don. Many of you probably know Don McGorman. He was not an original founding member of Clean North, but he was around. He did attend a couple of the meetings he told me of the Blue Box conversations. And then in the early 1990s, he got involved in a tree rescue project where there were some trees that I believe some came from Canadian Forest Service Lab and some came from the Ontario Forest Research Institute, which got formed and built in, I'm going to say 1990 or so. The Ofri building was built, and Don spent part of his M&R career at the Ofri building. So one of the things that came up was rescuing trees that were no longer needed for research projects. And instead of pitching them in the dumpster, Don and some others would grab them and they'd find a place to plant them. So there have been many tree plantations over the years. One of the things Don leads right now is our Christmas tree recycling depot. And it takes a lot of effort. He starts that in September, starts with the planning. He has about, I'm going to say 10 or 12 corporate partners who contribute time and resources, the space at Cambrian Mall. And he has to line all that stuff up in the fall and get it ready to go so that we can start collecting trees right after Christmas. And then we mulch it up. The last few years, we've been doing a spring mulch giveaway at Algoma University. We used to do a second one at Lemieux's. With Lemieux's closed, and we've actually seen a reduction in Christmas trees collected over the last few years. We're now down to one Christmas tree mulch event a year in the spring. Don has done many, many litter cleanups with his volunteers. Don has been very involved in recycling. He's at Harvest Algoma probably almost every day of the week. He does the Great Pumpkin Rescue in the fall. He is collecting produce from community gardens and from grocers and getting it to Harvest Algoma. And if they can't use it, then he's getting it into composting and recycling. Don has, in the summertime, he's also really, really busy with community gardens. He has been part of the establishment. At the moment, I think we have, it's 5 or 6 locations of community gardens, over 70 garden beds. And Don is directly involved in the management and the maintenance and the care and upkeep of those community gardens. Over 30 of those garden beds are producing produce that's going to either Harvest Algoma or, oh gosh, I've just forgotten the name of it. The community garden project that Colin Templeton runs, Food Bank Farms. So a lot of material is being put to good use in his community gardens. He has a number of families who really need the produce that they're getting from that community garden. A number of families who are new to Canada in our community are part of the community garden program. So Don and his volunteers spend a lot of hours working on the community gardens in the warm season. He's also active at several events. The key ones are CD Saturday, Central Algoma CD Saturday. We were just out at the Sustain Algoma Expo out in Deborah a couple of weeks ago. We've been out there every year for a number of years. And one of the activities that Don is really good at is worm composting. So he has these trays of red wigglers that he uses in his in-home composters, and he gets kids to sort worms. So he's teaching them by getting them handling those trays of worms, and he's teaching them about composting, and one-on-one, one kid at a time. He's working with kids to teach them about recycling and composting and the importance of not just throwing things in the landfill. He's also active in several school classrooms that have worm composters, and he periodically visits them during the school year and helps them maintain and talks about recycling and reduction and reuse and the importance of home composting for reducing the load on our landfill. Without Don, we would lose a huge, huge amount of community time, effort, and climate change impact on reducing input to the landfill, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from those organic materials. The Christmas Tree Depot alone, we've estimated over the years, we've kept over 100,000 trees out of the landfill, which is pretty remarkable. So Don is one of our heroes, and he's a great guy to work with as well. This is Don in the center of this picture up here, if you're not familiar with him. Kind of a shy guy. He doesn't like to have his picture taken, but he's a good guy. Another guy that's been very heavily involved in Clean North for quite a few years. He told me he was a volunteer when he was still a teacher, and Clean North got rolling in the early 1990s. Peter McClarty did volunteer for projects, and he retired in 2000, and he became very active in Clean North. He was the board chair for many, many years. Peter was involved in the establishment of the Allard Street Garden, which is one of the first community gardens in town. He is our key guy on rain barrel procurement and production. He has been involved in municipal tree bylaw work and monitoring of tree harvesting as part of city operations and advocating for retention of urban trees. And most recently, Peter has been, he is the spearhead for an organization called Stackwatch. Hopefully, those of you in the Sioux Climate Hub are familiar with Stackwatch, but this is a grassroots organization. We're taking the words of our own provincial Ministry of Environment and Parks and Energy, or whatever their name is today. They want citizens to report when they see environmental contamination issues. So a big part of Stackwatch is watching Algoma, watching the stacks and the smoke plumes and reporting it. And using that information to lobby and to communicate with Ministry of Environment and with our municipal leaders and our provincial leaders to fairly, but to follow the provincial legislation and hold industrial operators in our community accountable to follow the provincial guidelines, including our own provincial government. It's a pretty thankless job, but we're grateful, and Peter is really tenacious and forming Stackwatch as a mechanism for people to be aware and to have a place to report if they see a plume or if they see coating of ash on their vehicle in the morning. Those are the kind of things that Stackwatch is after. Rob Bresson is one of our longstanding active Clean North members. He has been a board member. He was our secretary for many years. And Rob's particular, his leadership right now, although his work is keeping him very busy and he's had to step away from Clean North a little bit, he is still our lead for our community awards program. So every year we have an announcement. We take nominations for individuals, for youth, for adults, for not-for-profits, and for businesses to be nominated for a Clean North Environmental Award to recognize their contribution, their leadership, their knowledge, and their passion about making a positive contribution to the Sioux and Algoma environment. So kudos to Rob for maintaining that. We've got four young award winners that we're just trying to get connected with right now and present them with their awards. Andrea Wells was one of our founding members in 1989. And I was very pleased this year that Andrea has come back to Clean North. I of course, knew Andrea over the years, but we're very happy to have her back and re-engaged with Clean North. And her primary focus is on engaging with youth, especially K through 8 children in schools, beaver organizations, and she's been out setting up youth programming and working with youth in the classrooms and at their meetings, trying to teach them about the conditions of our landfill, that it is filling up. It's a finite resource. It's an emitter of greenhouse gases, and the important steps and the language around how single-use items that we use and dispose of and end up in the landfill versus recycling, which is good, but reduction of use is even better. And so she's done classroom demonstrations, hands-on demonstrations, for example, on how to make paper. And she links it to trees and the important role that trees play in our ecosystem, and gets the kids messy making paper. And then she also is able to engage with them at a very practical, kid-oriented level. She's really, really good with the kids. And we're really happy to have that part of our program strengthened up in the last year. Walter Chan, I suspect you guys know him. He's a member of Sioux Climate Hub, and I think he's been active with you folks as well. But he came to us when he moved here from Winnipeg a few years ago. And Walter's passion really is around advocacy and demonstrating peaceful protesting, making the public and politicians aware and trying to hold them accountable with the messages that we have enough fossil fuel infrastructure. We do not need to have more fossil fuel infrastructure. We have global greenhouse gas and fossil fuel reduction targets that as a country we're trying to meet. And as a community, we need to be part of that. And so holding our politicians accountable and holding our corporate community members who have significant investments in the fossil fuel industry is really what Walter's about. And then a second and third message that Walter has is around equity and fairness and the link between individual people in the community and environmental conditions and environmental justice and indigenous justice. So Walter is a really fascinating guy, highly educated and really passionate. And we've been very happy to have Walter join Clean North. And Clean North has participated in several of his organized peaceful protest events. So we're happy that we've got Walter here in the Sioux now. And I suspect you guys are happy to have Walter as part of the Sioux Climate Hub as well. Sherry Tuck is one of our younger active members. She is a principal employee and leader at Ergo Office Interiors here in the Sioux. And Sherry has gotten involved with us on a couple of projects. One is as Ergo Office Interiors, and I worked with them when I was with the ministry. We had a couple of office projects that Ergo came in. So I got to know Sherry way back when. And one of the things that she's observed in their business is how much material, office furniture, when we fit an office, how much of it comes packed in styrofoam. And that styrofoam is single use. And here in Northern Ontario, we don't have a commercial market to recycle. We don't have a mechanism in place that's cost effective to recycle styrofoam. We have had a couple of efforts over the years as part of our Christmas tree depot. I can remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, we had a bin at the depot, and we could take styrofoam, and we had a contractor who was hauling those bins down to Southern Ontario. We no longer have that, and we haven't for a number of years. And so our styrofoam here from commercial and from those packages we get from Amazon, all that styrofoam is going in the landfill up here. There are other communities across Canada that have styrofoam recycling. So Sherry is really working hard. She's trying to generate enough critical mass within the commercial community, the business sector in the Sioux, and then she's also researching other communities in Northern Ontario and talking to styrofoam recycling vendors in Southern Ontario, trying to build a network that will turn into a viable styrofoam recycling pathway for us here in Northern Ontario. It's a huge slog for her, and I think she's making progress, but we have a long ways to go. Another project that Sherry is leading is this product down here on the counter in the center picture. It's a countertop foods recycling, a composter, kitchen composter. And Sherry is the lead on trying to get a grant from the city Green Initiatives Fund that will help subsidize 100 of these units coming in at a discount to get more kitchen countertop composting going. These really neat units. And again, the effort is on at the individual household level, trying to raise awareness, increase knowledge, increase comfort level, and reduce what we put in our landfill. This is Sherry over here on the right. She was part of our tree plant, and I'm going to talk about that project when I get to my page. But Sherry brought a crew of Ergo guys out on 2 different days. So Ergo contributed with Sherry's help a number of hours of physical labor on a big tree plant that we did last year. And so we're really happy to have Sherry as part of our Clean North community, and her working on a sector of our city that we don't have very much other involvement in, that commercial sector, and particularly on styrofoam. Couldn't get by without talking about Abby. Of course, as Rob mentioned, I'm married to Abby, so I have a bit of a conflict of interest here. But Abby got involved with Clean North before I did. And in fact, I got involved in Clean North as Abby and I were approaching our retirement together in 2019. There was a Clean North pizza party in the fall of 2019 where the board members were getting together and they were going to have an informal meeting. And Abby said, I'm going. Hey, why don't you come? You know half these people. Well, I found out that night that Peter wanted to retire. He wanted to step back from being board chair. I ended up being elected board chair that night. So, Abby, you can thank Abby for that. I do every day. So Abby's role with Clean North is she is our communications person. She got involved and she brings over 40 years of professional communication training and experience to bear on Clean North. And she manages we have pretty much all the social media platforms covered. She started with a website. She redesigned it, cleaned it up, modernized it. And she is our writer, our designer, our maintainer of the Clean North website. Facebook page was a big one that she started with, were regular posts on Facebook about our activities and making our communications readily available to the Facebook community. She's broadened out to what used to be Twitter and is now X. And she's also gotten on Instagram and has really had fun in the last year or so shooting videos, reels to go on Instagram and TikTok. So Abby has a gift for taking complex material and turning it into very consumable messaging to reach out. A core tenet of Clean North is talking to our community, educating them about things like what can go in the blue box, native plants, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about native plants in a minute. But producing really high quality graphic information that is available electronically from our social media platforms and in printed form and as a backdrop at our event exhibits. When she got involved as the communications person, and it's almost a full-time job for her, she really stepped up Clean North's game, and I think put our brand, our organization really front and center in this community, where a lot of people know about Clean North because of the high quality messaging. It's readily accessible, and the interesting and informative information that she's able to communicate through her talents and skills. One of the things that Abby has also brought as a project area a few years ago, she got really concerned. She's been a gardener for her whole life. She's been gardening for 50 years, particularly flower gardening. And she got really concerned as we would walk around town and go through various woodlots and park areas. She got really concerned and got herself educated about invasive plants. And she spent some time producing material about what invasive plants were and the harm they pose, or the threat they posed and the harm they cause in our natural areas. And it got to be a really difficult problem to communicate because it was a pretty negative message. So then she turned it on its head and said, well, okay, it's important that people understand the importance of and the harm that invasive plants can cause in our community. But let's give them something positive to work with. So let's talk about native perennial flowers and the role they play in supporting native invertebrate populations below ground, native ecosystem structure and function. And so it's turned into this double message of watch out for invasives. And if you have them and you want to do something about them, here are some best management practices to manage or control most of the invasive plants. Some of them are almost intractable, and those are frustrating to deal with, but we have them here in town. Japanese knotweed, creeping purple bellflower, periwinkle, goutweed. My goodness, I think anybody who's a gardener, you've got some or all of those. And if you have a passing awareness and knowledge level of invasive plants, and you've walked through our woodlots, which we're lucky to have here in the city, the green spaces, the amount of invasive plants that are in those woodlots is really frightening. And it's really, they are really broken ecosystems in a lot of those woodlots. So what we're trying to do with this native plant focus of Clean North is to educate the public, educate gardeners, give them some tools to use if they've got invasive plants and they want to make a change. Here are some ways that you can help manage that. And here are some plants you can replace those invasives with that are native to Algoma, native to Sioux, native to Ontario, that not only produce beautiful flowers, but are also good for the ecosystem, good for those pollinators and the below ground invertebrates in our community. So kudos to Abby for producing this program and for really being the brains behind it. A lot of research, a lot of good science has gone into this program that she's the lead on. And I'll talk a little bit about some of my projects in addition to being the board chair, which, you know, takes a couple hours a month, not a big deal. I lead litter cleanups. I've done small ones with 2 or 3 or 4 volunteers coming out, fill up my little trailer and go up to the dump and deposit it. I've led big cleanups of woodlot areas. I have been one of the partners with the Invasive Species Center, leading a Himalayan balsam pole last year, and we're going to do another one this year. Our spot is over at Mike Zook Park on the West End, and we'll be back to see how we did last year with our first pole in there. We pulled a lot of bags of Himalayan balsam out of that ditch along Mike Zook Park. I have done tree plants. Last year, one of the things that I like to do, and I kind of focus on, is larger complex projects that require some funding. I've written 2 successful grant proposals. One of the things I did as a ministry scientist was I wrote grant proposals, and I was pretty good at it. So I brought that skill set to Clean North. And I've written 2 grant proposals to the City Green Environmental Fund. One was for recycling pill bottles and providing those community gardens that I talked about with Don, providing them with a refill on soil. And then we did a big project last year. I won't go into the story of how we got involved, but we became aware that the Northway Inpatient Treatment Center up at Old Garden River Road and Second Line was falling a little bit short on their landscaping budget. And so with those trees that Don has been saving over the years, we had a source of trees. And the Northway site and the landscape architect and the contractor, Saldan, were really excited when we came to them and said, how would you guys like some trees? So we put together a project and we transplanted 100 cedar trees and about 25 oak seedlings from our plantation site at the Ofri Arboretum out on Third Line to the Northway site. And they're in 2 spots there on the Northway site. And we've had, to my knowledge, of the 110 or so trees that we planted, 1 cedar tree died. So we have a very, very high mortality, very, very high survival rate. And I'm really pleased and that we're part of that. And every time I drive by there, I think about the hundreds of hours of volunteer time that we pulled together, the grant money, the contract, the collaborative effort that we had from a number of businesses here in the Sioux to make that project work. So that's one of the things I like to do, is sort of pull together complex projects that are a little bit beyond the means of our sort of very small Clean North bank account and bring some resources to bear. Another project I did 2 years ago. If you're familiar with the Voyageur Trail, up behind Glenview Cottages, there's a place called McIntyre Lake. And every time I walked by, I saw this derelict boat sitting in the bay in McIntyre Lake. I did some digging. I talked to some neighbors up there. I started to figure out whose boat it was. And I pulled together a project. We had, I think it was about 12 or 15 of us volunteers, including the Ministry of Natural Resources, sent a crew and a couple of trucks out. And we got that boat out of that lake. We got it over to the shoreline, and then it had to come apart into pieces that we could hold in our hands. So we spent all day getting that boat out of there and up to the landfill. But we got it out of McIntyre Lake. So that's another example of pulling together a project that required a whole bunch of bodies and some coordination and making a difference in an important natural feature in our community. As I said, I've done a lot of litter cleanups. We did one on a private landowner, had a problem. It's at the end of a road, and it's also where the Voyageur Trail crosses. And this was one of those spots in Algoma, and we've all seen them, where people feel like it's okay. They don't want to spend that $12 at the landfill, so they bring their pickup truck out to the end of the road and dump their household waste. So we had this private landowner who was a good friend to the Voyageur Trails and a good friend to Clean North. And we got a dumpster in there, and we got a crew of about 12 or 15 people and spent a day, and we filled that dumpster up. So another example of a litter project that's a little bit beyond the, the average 5 people and filling up our little trailer. And it felt pretty darn good to, I think that was 3,000 kilograms of stuff that we got off that private land and up to the landfill. And then I'm also actively involved with Abby on our native plants. And one of the things we do is we collect seeds in the fall and we do winter sowing. The native wildflowers, for those of you who might not be familiar, and if you haven't heard the story at one of our events, native wildflowers require a period of cold stratification, cold, moist stratification, where they shed their seed in the fall. Those seeds lie under the snow, and then as the snow melts off, 4 or 5 months later, those seeds have been cold, moist stratified. Well, with winter sowing, what we do is collect the seeds, clean them in the fall, and then we plant them in containers and put them out in the snow. We stacked them in this my little utility trailer here I had in the driveway that was filled up with bins that had these containers in them. Sat out in the snow in the cold for February, March, April, May. As the snow starts to melt off, these turn into little greenhouses. As we get warmer and warmer days, we take the tops off, and you can see in these jugs a whole bunch of green stuff. So we have been very successful over the past few years of raising, my goodness, Joe Pye weed and several species of sunflower and pearly everlasting, and a couple of spring primroses, and oh gosh, a whole bunch of native wildflowers. As we're advocating for people to move away from invasive plants and go to natives, there are very few sources of native wildflowers out there. There are a couple of commercial outfits that you can find online that do sell commercially sell native wildflowers. And because of our efforts, 2 years ago, Abby and I were at the Canadian Tire Garden Center, and we noticed that there was a pretty nasty invasive that they were selling. It's called yellow archangel. It was in pots, and they were selling it as a ground cover. So I asked one of the clerks, is the greenhouse department manager in the store? It was this young woman. She was brand new that year. And she engaged with me in a conversation, and I pointed out to her that yellow archangel was a pretty bad invasive plant, and I could take her out in a woodlot here next to our house and show her how yellow archangel was dominating a patch of a natural woodlot. This year, that young woman has brought back the native plant display and the native plant sales rack that Canadian Tire discontinued about 4 or 5 years ago. She brought it back. When she contacted that vendor where she got her yellow archangel from and tried to have a conversation with that vendor about selling yellow archangel, it resulted in her dropping that vendor from the Canadian Tire Garden Center because she couldn't come to terms with the person about selling invasive plants. So we are having an impact, and we make these plants available to people in our driveway at CD Saturday at the Sustain Algoma Expo. We're distributing native flowering plants, and we make seed packets available as well in the fall and distribute those. So at this native plant program that Abby started, I'm very involved in, and I love being a part of it. Again, we're having an impact on the community. The other thing that I have a fair bit of experience with being a ministry employee for 28 years. I did a lot of presentations at conferences. I'm pretty comfortable setting up an exhibit and standing at a table and talking about Clean North and about the things we do and inviting people to get engaged and making native plants available for them at our events. So one of the roles I play for Clean North is I'm often the face of Clean North at these events. So that is a very quick summary. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Come back to here. And I want to thank a number of our regular partner organizations that we deal with. Clean North could not be as good at what we do, not as successful, not have as many positive outcomes as we have had, were it not for organizations like the Sioux Climate Hub, the City of Sault Ste. Marie, with special thanks to Emily Cormier, who's the City Environmental Coordinator, the Invasive Species Center, the Downtown Association, the Sault Ste. Marie Hort Society, the Seedy Saturday and Central Algoma Seedy Saturday, the Kensington Nature Conservancy we partner with, Voyageur Trail Association and their local club, the Saulteaux Club, the Algoma District School Board and several schools where Don and Andrea are working and have access to classrooms, and Harvest Algoma, just to name it, and the Food Bank Farm. And I've probably missed as many as I've mentioned here. So to those I've missed, I apologize. But we really do thrive on, for our monthly meetings, we have about 11 or 12 people who are regular attendees. That's it. And then we have on our mailing list and our contributors list and our members list, we have roughly 125, 130 people that we are in regular contact with or who are financial supporters of Clean North. And then we have, like, I maintain a list and Don maintains a list of volunteers that we email when we're planning an event. Like, I've got a little project I'm doing tomorrow. I've got 3 volunteers coming out. I have about 20 or 30 people on my list. Don has probably 15 or 20, of whom he has maybe 8 or 10 who are regular volunteers for us. And we cycle through them. They graduate, they move on, but we rely heavily on those volunteers. And, we wouldn't be doing this, Don and Peter and Abby and Sherry and Rob and Andrea and Walter, we wouldn't be doing this with Clean North if we weren't having fun too. We feel good. We give people an opportunity to come out and do something, get their hands dirty and make a contribution. And hopefully we inform a lot more people. Our broader audience of our communications is really important. We're happy to be here. And so I want to, again, I will thank Rob and Sandra for the invitation. I hope you've picked up a little something or learned a little bit about Clean North. And I will open the floor up to questions now.
All right. Well, I'd like to, right offhand, I'd like to really thank you very much, Bill, for a fascinating presentation. And certainly as a member of a relatively new organization, there's lots of stuff we can learn from what you presented, even organizational stuff, which is really, really impressive. So please either put your hand up in electronically or put your question in the chat, and we'll proceed from there. So I might just start by reading some of the comments in the chat. A number of them are from Abby. So, so to start with, the amount of food waste he is diverting, and I believe you're talking here about Don McGorman, is diverting to the landfill and thus reducing methane emissions is amazing. Also, last year, Algoma U students gave a presentation on student-led research on the feasibility of a styrofoam recycling plant. I haven't heard anything more about this. We might have to follow it up and see if there are any new developments. And finally, also good for climate change. And I believe she is talking about invasive species. The problem of climate change and invasive species. Pardon me. Let's see if we can get that down. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
One of the things we could try, but remember that slide where I talked about we look at a project and does it have an achievable outcome? And we have some projects that come across our idea discussion format that we talk about and we think, man, that's almost an intractable problem. So things like yellow archangel in the woodlot next to us, or periwinkle, or goutweed, or Japanese knotweed. Do we want to take on trying to clean up these woodlots and make them a native plant woodlot? An alternative to taking on such a daunting and difficult task. And there are communities that do this where they, a group of dedicated volunteers with leadership, they go into that woodlot every year and they, dig and pull and plant natives, and God bless them for doing it. An alternative approach is we're advocating for individual homeowners and cottage owners, first, to do no harm. If you've not got invasives, be informed and don't bring invasives onto your property. Don't buy invasives. Don't get invasives from your buddy or your uncle or grandpa or whoever. Don't transport invasive plants. If you have invasives on your property and you're willing and able to tackle it, try to reduce their footprint. And some of them are really difficult. Some of them are a little easier. And you can use native plants to help outcompete them as well. So it's not just a matter of, gosh, if we could only use herbicides to get rid of it. That's really not an option for us right now, and for a lot of good reasons. But what we're trying to also do is, particularly for airborne insects, butterflies, moths, flies, wasps, bees, a whole bunch, an interconnected or a network across the city of garden patches, just in your backyard or at camp, of native plants is an effective framework to support that component of natural ecosystem. It's not a continuous natural ecosystem. It's not taking that woodlot full of invasives and turning it into a beautiful, pristine native forest. But if we got 100 landowners in town here to all plant swamp milkweed or butterfly milkweed or common milkweed, we have increased the available habitat of milkweed around the community, effectively helping native monarchs to reproduce and thrive. And for every monarch that we know about, there's 50 insects that we don't know about that we're helping. So that's a practical solution for and an impact of native plants on a very small scale by each and every one of us. I'll let you get back to the chat here.
All right. Daniel Hudson says, thank you for the great talk, Bill. Truly inspiring. I have a winter sowing question, and I guess it's good that Abby's on this as well. Do you leave the soil in the containers over the summer and keep it ready to go for next year? Or do you start fresh each year soil-wise?
That's a good question, Danielle. We do not keep the soil in the containers. The containers are like little starter pots, and we found the most effective way, rather than tease those little seedlings out of the soil, is we dump them out carefully. And so we have this little clump of soil with the plant. I plant those little plugs. I will sometimes divide them. And we have also sort of gone into production mode. Last year and the year before, we went into high production mode. We would take them out of the containers, divide them, and repot them, multiplying our take in June, so that by July, August, we had 5-10 times the number of potted plants available for distribution. So no, we remove the soil and plant it like a jiffy pot, like a plug. Plant the whole thing right in the ground where it's going to go. And then you've got that small native plant has already got contact with the soil, and the survivability is very high. They're easy to handle and transport. And then we start over. We recycle most of our containers. We use yogurt cups and small pots. And the picture you saw, clear plastic milk jugs and window washer solvent jugs work really well. You can get those jugs from the local Jiffy Lubes. They put them in a big plastic bag. And I've gone in half a dozen times to the local Jiffy Lubes and said, hey, have you got a bag full of window washer jugs that I could take? And we sort through and take the ones that have oil in them out. And they give me a giant bag of window washer jugs. I rinse them out, and boom, you've got these clean jugs. We plant in there, and then anyway. So we reuse the containers. We do not reuse the soil. We plant the soil as plugs.
All right. Paul said, great talk, Bill. Operational question. Do you require a waiver for volunteers working on your projects?
Absolutely. Clean North as an organization is required to have a liability insurance policy, but it does not cover our volunteers as if they were employees. So they are on their own. So every event that I lead, I read a disclaimer, I do a tailgate talk, and I have them sign the form saying they recognize they're on their own. So we're very careful. In my 5 years of leading projects, I haven't had an incident or injury, and we want to keep it that way. So we work safely, we provide PPE, but yeah, that waiver is a pretty important thing to keep us out of trouble in case something unfortunate does happen to somebody. Good question.
Nadine asked, do you have advice on how to go about getting rid of goutweed in your garden? And if I could add to that, how about bishopweed?
Oh, Abby, do you want to jump in on that one? You're probably a better expert than I am.
Sure. With goutweed, it really depends. If you have high value perennials mixed in with goutweed, my recommendation would be to remove the high value perennials, carefully root wash them to make sure that you get rid of every bit of root off the high value perennials, plant them somewhere else. And then I would tarp the goutweed for at least 2 years. I would put a tarp over it, and then you can disguise it by putting whatever, yard waste or mulch or whatever over top of it. But you need to go out a little bit. You can't just do, like, if you just do it to the very edge of the goutweed, it's probably going to go past the tarp. Anyway, this is what we're trying. There's an area outside our fence. It's along a public catwalk that right across the path from us. There's goutweed, and we've tarped it, and we're leaving it for 2 years. We're going to lift the tarp next year, which will be 2 years, and see if it's gone. But like, you know, people say, oh, pull it, you know, just keep pulling it, keep digging it. And I'm like, I don't have the energy for that. So I feel like, and if the big problem is if you have neighbors who have goutweed, because if your neighbors have goutweed and they're not willing to do anything about it, then it becomes really challenging.
Is it a bad idea to pull it though? Like, I mean, if
no, this is a
Yeah.
really good question, because one of the things I learned a year ago is that so I'm going to go a little bit off topic here to Japanese knotweed. You cannot physically disturb Japanese knotweed in any way, because if you do, it stimulates exponential lateral growth of the root system. And I'm pretty sure that this is all, I spent a lot of time in the Creeping Bellflower Facebook group this spring, and I'm pretty convinced that this is also true of Creeping Bellflower, because there are so many people who are like, I spent weeks digging all the bellflower out, and this year it's worse than ever. And I don't know if this is true of goutweed or not, but I have a suspicion that we have a lot to learn about how invasive species respond to disturbance. And this is why there's a large binational Facebook group for invasive species identification and eradication. And this is why so many people in that group who are in the US are using herbicides, because trying to remove invasive species physically is extremely difficult. It depends, like Himalayan balsam pulls very easily because it's an annual. If you get it before it goes to seed, you can eradicate the patch in a couple of years. But, you know, these ones with these extensive root systems like goutweed, it's just really challenging. But what I would try, if you have like a manageable patch and you can get the high value perennials out there, is I would recommend tarping.
Another recommendation is for any kind of invasive, if you do want to try to control it, be observant about what's going on in your garden. And if you've got a place where it's coming through and your invasive is robust, but you've got a patch next to it where it's like, huh, it really isn't doing so well there. What plant is growing there that's out competing it? Like we're using hosta and we're using primrose and pearly everlasting, kind of low vegetation. It doesn't get real tall, but we're using that at the front of our gardens because they form such a dense layer. They help in the battle. They won't single-handedly eliminate an invasive, but if you're creative at using those plants that are as competitive or more competitive and form a dense layer, it can help hold those invasives sort of in check. Sort of.
Okay, well, thanks, Bill. Abby mentioned that on the chat, she is sharing an example. You can go there and get the link on an example of volunteer stewardship in urban natural areas. Janet said, thank you, Clean North, for all you do. Truly amazing. Wow, just wow. I'm assuming lily of the valley needs to be removed from my garden.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you, Janet. Our approach is to not be lectury or prescriptive, to tell people that's a bad plant, you should, you know, we try not to get finger wagging at people. We try to give them information and use that information the way you're comfortable with. Lily of the Valley is an interesting one. Of the, you know, the 3 CD Saturday and 2 CD Saturday and Sustain Algoma Expo that I've done the last 3 years, I bet Lily of the Valley is the one that's most surprising and most often comes up. Somebody will say, what? Lily of the Valley's invasive? And the one where most often we get in an argument or a debate. Oh, it's not invasive, you know, and technically the definition, and Abby can go on great detail about this, but Lily of the Valley is non-native and it causes harm. And we can show you some places where it's taken over at the expense of the native plants in that ecosystem. And by every credible professional standard, Lily of the Valley in Algoma is an invasive. Whether or not you want to remove it is your choice with that information. But it does qualify as an invasive. So
I may also add here that there is a native wild lily of the valley, at least that's what its common name is, and it's Myanthemum canadensis. So please don't go removing that one. Okay. Carmen, thank you for such an important presentation, Bill. A small, simple question. What kind of tarps do you use? Most tarps that are sold are of plastic weave.
they are, and they don't hold up very well, and a lot of native plant or invasive plants will grow right through them. The tarp that I'm using is actually, have you driven by a marina or a place where, you know, the storage lots with campers and boats, that black or the blue shrink wrap plastic that's on boats? That gets taken off those boats and thrown in the landfill every year. I went down to the marina at Deborah and had a conversation with the manager down there, and he gave me 10 pieces of that plastic. It's thick. It's not a weave. It's like an extruded. It's a solid plastic. And that's the tarp I'm using on our little trial goutweed patch next to our yard. So I think it's really good, and you can get it for free. Reach out to a couple of marinas or boat storage places, and at the end of spring, when they're taking those off their boats, you can probably get more of that stuff than you know what to do with.
All right. So Abby also says feel free to email info@cleannorth.org if you have any other invasive plant questions. Carmen says, I'd love that you bring the idea of companion planting as a control method. And finally, there is another link to the Clean North site for those who want to look in the chat. Are there any other questions or chat comments? If not, I'd like to again thank you, Bill, for such an amazing presentation. Well, you're a presenter and by trade, so good on you. And Clean North is such a wonderful organization to present with regard to. You certainly, I think, are without a doubt the leading environmental organization in the Algoma region.
Well, thanks, Robin. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy summer to log in and listen to the presentation. Abby and others have made it really accessible. If you go on our Clean North Facebook site or the Clean North website, all of our contact information is there. There's a link if you want to become a volunteer. There's a link if you want to donate. And there's everything that Abby produces is available for download. We share everything we've got for free. So, and if there's a specific request that you have, or if you have an event and you'd like some information around one of these topics, reach out to us, send us an email, and somebody will get back to you. And if we can help you, we will.
All right. Well, thanks again, Bill. And just a reminder, we do not have any webinars over the summer, but stay tuned for our fall webinar schedule. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.